Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Class Real Estate Podcast. My name is Martin, and today I am joined by Mr. Ian Macbeth. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, very good. Obviously, just getting over the football a little bit still, but I'm looking forward to today's guests. We've got two great guys on that I think are going to share a lot of value in the estate agency world coming up soon. So, yeah, looking forward to that. But yeah, football obviously bit of a bit of a down one on Monday in most of the offices, I would
Yeah,
have thought.
I think, unfortunately, I think Spain were probably just the best team throughout the tournament. And if you talk about football's a game of fine margins, estate agency is is it, I think, always a lot of small things either done really well or not done particularly well. Football, you can have the perfect game, make one mistake, and it's all gone. And I think if England would have won, Spain would have felt very hard done to. And I think that's made the whole thing feel a little bit more acceptable. England have done very well. They got to the final, and they pulled up just a little bit short. But it feels like the whole nation is not too upset because they know we probably didn't deserve to win. If it had
Yes.
been a dodgy red card or a dodgy penalty or something like that, you'd probably feel a little bit bitter. But I think you can probably reflect on it as a good tournament where we came up just short, and then at the highest level of sport, those margins are very, very fine. And whilst the players and the manager will be absolutely gutted, I think they'll probably, in time, come to think, well, Spain probably deserved it.
I think you can always relate team sport back to teams, and in particular for agency, office teams, sales teams.
Yeah.
But you can always just see it. And I think what was clear and evident is as a team that knew their roles, that were clearly defined and instructed, that were well disciplined, still flair and creativity and talent in the Spanish
Yeah.
team, but they were in the places where they needed to be doing the role they needed to do as a team. There was some phenomenal talent on the bench because they had two really good sets of players in the same position. They weren't
Yeah.
shoehorned into the team. One started, one didn't. And the England team for me just was that weaker sales team that had a lot of talent in it, but people were trying to overlap with each other's roles.
Yeah.
Responsibilities weren't clear. Maybe the foundations of the office, if you want to use that analogy, wasn't set up correctly. And as a result, the end result wasn't the desired result because of things from the top weren't set up correctly. And I think that goes probably further than Southgate in this analogy, but there's a lot of relatability for people listening today that think, right, what's my team set up like in the office? Am I
Yeah.
Spain or am I England? Or even worse than that, am I San Marino? And then you're in real trouble. But
Yes.
if you've got the talent, are you using it correctly? Is the key thing really.
Yeah. Get people in the right lanes, get them to stay in those lanes. And yeah, you don't need, or depending on the size of the business will depend how many superstars you need. If you've got a fairly small patch and a fairly small agency, you're not going to need two rock star valuers. You'd be better with one and somebody mopping up behind them. And I think that's quite a good analogy when comparing the Euros final, definitely. Um, but I think the two guests that we're going on today probably fall into the rock star category a little bit by what I've seen of them and that business growing over the last few years.
Yeah, specialist agency, self-employed model, dominant in say dominant. Their partners are dominated across the Midlands, is kind of the typical sort of area that they seem to focus on. Be it that I'm sure they'll go up and down the country over the years to come. But again, two business partners that have got a bit of a yin and yang kind
Yeah,
of mindset, different personalities, different characters. So we'll probably get different sides of value from each of them, which I'm looking forward to as well. And I think for estate agents, it's probably refreshing to have guests like this on because they will be able to see through the eyes of someone else that's really tried to push innovation, be different, and share with us some of those stories, experiences, and values that have come from going against the grain a little bit, which
yeah.
which is what I'm looking forward to talking to James and Jack from the Avenue about, really.
Excellent. Let's dive on and have a chat with them, shall we?
Yeah. So, Jack and James, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Looking forward to sharing lots of value. How are you both?
Very
Really well,
good.
thank you.
Thank you
Good,
for having
good,
us
good.
on.
I think first of all, happy birthday for the Avenue hitting 3 years. Cracking milestone.
Yeah, yes, it's flown by, right? It's where have the last 3 years gone? But no, it's been a roller coaster. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely cover that. Mark has always got a key prodding question which kicks off the podcast with his new background. So over to you, Mark.
I'm not sure if anyone knows what this question's going to be, actually. But thanks very much for joining us, fellas. And we'll go to Jack first. And it feels like I've not asked this question for a little while, actually, Ian. But what does world-class estate agency look like to you, Jack?
So to kind of summarize it, I think world-class estate agency for me is creating the best possible customer experience. So, and I think you can do that through marketing and the service that you offer. I think for the customer, the journey is quite a long process from when they first meet to the very, very end, especially in the UK anyway. And I think the more touch points you can have with the customer and also overcoming some of the questions they're going to have before they come up with those questions. We had it the other day where we've got a client that wants to go out and do a measure up. And I said to my client executive, I was like, we should be picking that up before the customer asks. We should be inviting them to go and do a measure up a few weeks before. So I think creating the best possible customer experience and doing that through marketing and the service that you offer and having multiple touch points throughout the whole process.
Do you think that, Jack, would be helped if people in the public's eye, in the public, had a better education of the process? Because I find a lot of the time with agency, they don't actually understand what's going on, and it's kind of down to us to communicate and educate, which doesn't always happen, I guess.
Yeah, they don't know what they don't know. And I think we should be educating them on that. We should be the ones that are reaching out to them. Like I said, before the question comes up, we should be on that straight away. So they feel as though they have the best possible experience. So yeah, I think we need to get on the front foot a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. The client education, being consistent with the process and giving them more information. Someone said once to me, with more information, you can make better decisions. And I think that's probably the way that us as estate agents need to look at things with the client, even when they think they know best, even if it's portrayed that they do, they probably don't. And we probably need to still give them the advice, I would say, as well. No, great answer. Thank you. James, what about yourself? What's it look like to you? World-class estate agency, real estate?
World-class real estate, in my view. I think to expand and to connect to Jack's point, I think the client experience is the key. But I think from an internally, from an actual agent's perspective, I think having an open mind, a growth mindset, and a taste and a flavour for continual innovation. So innovation around the process, innovation around marketing, innovation around how things should be done. I think for me, the two then connect. And as you so rightly have said, Ian, a better education of the public so they understand the journey that they're going on, so that then the value that they then receive is understood. And I think there's a lot of agents out there right now across social media in general, which is where obviously we're seeing a lot of it, and podcasts that are talking about value, add lots of value, raise your fees, be better. But without the customer and the client and the person receiving all of that value understanding why that they need it, a lot of that time could be wasted in energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Great points.
James, so you talk about sort of the growth mindset there, which I think is really, really interesting. We are obviously quite into that. How important do you think that aspect is and has been when you've been growing your company to this point? And how do you know if someone's got a growth mindset or not when you interviewing them for a job, for example?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it's being able to separate it out, right? Because estate agents can quite often be chameleons. And so they just present themselves. And especially when, if like the four of us were quite prominent in agency land, on social media, podcasts, whatever, people know what they're interacting with. People could listen to this pod and know that my mindset is very much about growth and innovation. So then if they meet me with the prospect of partnering with us, they know that they've got to say the right things in the right places. So we have a process that Jack and I will speak to an agent, then the other one will speak to an agent, then we'll have a third conversation with them. And through the process, the questions we're asking, the answers, I think active listening is more important than the questions we ask from a partner interaction perspective, but equally from a client interaction perspective. So it's the answers and reading between the lines of those answers that I'm specifically looking for.
2 ears, 1 mouth, eh?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think listening to a client, I think it might have been Adam Walker or one of the early days agency trainers used to say, when you're on the valuation, 75% of the time you should be listening, 25% of the time talking. But typically the classic kind of alpha salesy type character is often doing it the other way around. I would say, Jack, it's normally that way around, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes you can overtalk as well and overcompensate and oversell. Yeah, for us, we try and train our agents on that first initial meeting when you go down and go in and sit with a client. It shouldn't be just a 5-minute job. It should be a 15-minute, half an hour, however long it takes for that customer to feel comfortable in your presence and for you to feel as though they're ready to open up to you. And I think, yeah, that's really important when you're first meeting with a client.
One of the core things with the avenue that I saw on the website, me and Mark were having a look at the website prior to the pod, and the first word that comes up is specialist. So I'm interested to know, you guys, like, how did you guys come together as business partners? And then just take us back to like the kind of core principles and the values of the avenue and how it was sort of evolved and formed from this kind of random idea that then takes kind of traction and turns into what it turns into 3 years later. So talk to us about that, Jack. How did you guys kind of come together as business partners?
So James and I met at our previous business, and we're at Purplebricks before. We'd worked there, so I'd worked there for 3 years. James had been there from the very, very start, very launch. And James and I worked very closely for just over a year, 18 months. The idea around the avenue existed because it got to a point with Purplebricks where I was working really hard being an agent, listing a lot of properties, 30, 40 a month you'd have to list to try and earn good money. And you can only do that for a short period of time, I believe, before you get burnout. And I got that, and it got to a point where I was questioning whether I wanted to remain within a state agency, lost the passion, lost the love for it. So the idea behind the avenue is being able to take on better quality properties, be able to command better fees by offering more value to clients, working with a limited number of clients, which means we've got more time to be able to dedicate to giving the right advice, the right service, be more proactive, but also having that time back as well that you need. So you've got a better work-life balance. So yeah, James and I met, was it 2020 or early 2019? And then we launched the avenue in 2021.
And what was your background prior to Purplebricks then? Obviously, James been there a little while, but were you agents before you were agents at Purplebricks? And talk us through the different mindset that you have to employ as an agent when you are looking to list 30, 40 properties a month versus trying to demonstrate a really good customer experience so that you can charge higher fees.
I'll take this one, Jack.
Go for it.
So my background, entered agency in 2004, worked as everyone does, junior neg through the process, became branch manager of one of the market leading firms down in Basingstoke, down in the south. Then got a phone call one day from a headhunter that was working alongside PB when they were launching, just to sort of say, look, we'd like to have a chat with you. There's a handful of others. Went and met, and obviously the rest, as I say, is history. And the process, so the mindset shift from the business that I was in to PB to then from PB to what we do now, because all of them are very different. PB was very much a marketing machine that just generated and churned out lead after lead after lead. So actually, if I'm being brutally honest, simply turning up and being good with people was all PB really needed. Because for every one listing that didn't want to go on the market, there would be 4 more you'd be going to that day. And so the volume fed the machine. So anyone that was good with people and had a basic level understanding of estate agency, and Jack, correct me if you disagree, but I felt it was very much focused on if you could get along with people, give them a basic understanding of the process. My attitude on reflection is that for every client I met with, they were getting an agent worth 10, 20 grand and they were getting me for £1,000. So actually I only had to turn up and be 10% as good as I ordinarily am, and I'm still giving them the value that they want from the process. The transition away from that to then creating the avenue, which, to be perfectly blunt and honest, from the experiences we had and from the way in which the Purplebricks business was traveling, I always had this vision in my own mind, and then I shared it with Jack, and it was like, okay, we're very aligned on this. That it was about high standards, quality offering, giving the customer what they need as well as what they want, but taking them on journeys where they get the better result. They feel at the end of it, where it hasn't been like they've been having their teeth pulled out by a dentist with no credentials. And so the transition, I'm going to pass this back to Jack now. How did you feel transitioning from PB to what we then decided we were going to create in the avenue?
I think the early stages was tough. So we'd been, I suppose, for 3 or 4 years, I'd focused on low fees, convincing the sellers that you didn't need to pay really high estate agency fees, and then we're going and setting up a business and doing the complete opposite of that. So the first 6 months was tough, and we staircased our way up the market. So we took on a listing at maybe 250,000. We marketed it like it was worth 500,000. Then we want to listen at 500, and we did the same with our fees as well. So we slowly crept those fees up. And I think for a lot of agents that we had come into the business at the start, they'd also came from Purplebricks. So they also felt the same struggles going from a low fee charging model to a higher fee charging model was quite a difficult transition. But once you build the confidence through understanding the value that you can offer. Once you understand the value and how you can deliver that to a client, it becomes a lot easier, and you then build that confidence, and you can then be confidently charging much higher fees, and knowing you're worth those fees as well.
Yeah, I share a story yesterday because I've got a marketing apprentice that does pretty much all our video type stuff, like short form video. Lovely, lovely guy. Never really been in business before, worked at the co-op before. He's only 20, had a sheltered upbringing in terms of like business life, shall we say. And he just randomly shouted across the office to me yesterday, why are Romans round where we are like the biggest agents? Like, what do they do to make them the biggest estate agency? And then I kind of sort of sat back with him and I said, well, officers, data, years of data, marketing power, leaflet drops, call centers, blah, 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 blah. And he said, okay, well, if that brings in like most of the business, why don't all the estate agents do it? And then the flip was obviously, right, well, when you do that way and you're looking at getting volume of vanilla, any client, every client and everyone, you don't have the ability to then really niche in on who your brand client is. And for you guys, obviously, with the avenue in the same way we have for Avocado and Mark does as well, is talking to that client on a more bespoke basis that more relates to what you're talking about. And you mentioned there about marketing a house that was like 500 grand capacity when it was a 250 house. Trying to appeal to the 500 grand market is very specialist, which goes back to the avenue's first word. What created that idea? I can understand from your point of view, burnout, 40 listings a month, like that just sounds like hell to me. But what created that idea from a more personal point of view? Was it really a case for you guys that it was for you? Was it for the partners? Was it for the future of a state agency? Did you just see something where you felt this is the route we must go? And I don't know, James, whether that's something when you were sort of coming up with that concept and idea that one of those was the trigger points that kind of pushed you to take the risk effectively of starting your own company.
It's a really great question. I think the foundation of the idea, I think the foundation of the direction, excuse me, of travel was around improving the standard of the industry. Now, this is quite controversial to say on a podcast like this where there's going to be a lot of agents listening, but I don't believe that the standards in agency are particularly high. Generally speaking, I would say that 90% of the industry operate at a very archaic and basic level. I think there's around 10% of the overall industry that probably listen to this pod that kind of go, yeah, I relate to that because I want to do things better. I believe that the customer deserves better. I believe that the agents within the industry deserve better. And so it started at that foundation level where it's like, okay, how do we make it better? Where do we start to improve what I believe is a pretty shoddy process when you compare us to our counterparts over the pond. Then it was a case of, okay, so if we can make the client experience better through X, Y, and Z, how does that then impact on the agent? And then ultimately, of course, we're going to win out of that process because, I've now got a young family. And so if I can get to a position where, like now, where after this pod, I'm going home, I'm spending the morning with my kids. It's Tuesday. I get that choice because I want to do that. And I've created an environment around myself where I can. And so for me, it all started though with how do we make the industry better? Because if the industry and the experience is better for everybody, then everybody wins.
Yeah, to add to that as well, I think the starting with a client. So I felt when we was at Purplebricks, there was times where you would be letting the client down because you didn't have enough hours in the day to be able to give the additional service, the additional support that they really deserved. The second part to that was I didn't want any one of our agents to go through what I went through with a burnout because they wouldn't have known it would happen when they first joined Purplebricks. Like I didn't know it would happen when I first joined, but I didn't want any of our agents to experience that or go through that. So I suppose providing a better service to the clients, which meant lower volume of stock because you don't have enough hours in the day, and also not letting the agents that we know and we care about go through the same burnout and frustrations that I did back in 2020.
And the clients that you want to deal with to achieve those things, and it's bandied around loads, isn't it? Work-life balance, if you want to use that term or whatever. But the clients who will pay the price so that you can live that life and appreciate the value, appreciate the customer service. You can't just do it with your fees and expect everyone to pay it because people won't do that. But if you can build a business whereby you're delivering on that customer experience, those clients understand that comes at a premium and understand that you deserve the work-life balance, right? Is that what you found? Maybe more in the last year than the first 2 years or something like that?
I think the big thing for us is how we launch a partner is really key, connected to the point you're making, Mark. So Jack and I, and we've got one of our partners, two of them that have been with us pretty much from day one. So for the four of us, we've now got an established name in our local communities. We've got a reputation for a certain quality of marketing and a certain result that we achieve, and we've got reviews that are testament to that. So we're at a point where, I don't know about you, Jack, but I very rarely sit in a living room where people are expecting us to compete on fee.
Yeah.
It's very, very uncommon. In fact, there's several occasions where I've been to see people where they say, look, we know you're not going to be the cheapest option. We know that. And you're kind of sitting there going, and occasions, and I know, Jack, you've had this, and I've had this quite a lot, where people are like, I just need you to let me know when you're looking around, is my house good enough for what you do? Now, I really want to caveat that with there is no arrogance attached to me sharing that point. If a customer says that to me, it clearly says that our brand is portraying in a certain way. And that's what we want to create, is that we've then got a relationship with the client. We don't work for them, we work with them. And so if they're looking at us and saying, well, your marketing's that good and the types of properties you sell are of that creme de la creme level, then I want to know whether I can fit that club. Can I be a part of your club? And that's then good for the working relationship because they trust you, they listen, they're open to being educated to a different way of business being delivered. But I think for some of our newer agents, they've got to build that. They can't just walk in and expect that the brand will carry them because they've got to build that in their community.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. Seeing exactly the same thing with us. I'm also interested to pick your brains a little bit for a piece of value from each of you, because I felt I had a 16-year career in agency, in normal agency, prior to launching our own business. But one thing that I will always say is, as an estate agent, take business owner to one side, but as an estate agent, I never learned more about estate agency than in the 6 months leading up to the launch of the business and the 12 months after. That 18-month window of launching our own company as an estate agent. Maybe it was going back in the tools, but the research prior, then the action, the conflict and the buy-in that came from being different, and then seeing it unfold for 12 months for me was the biggest kind of set of lessons. I've probably got 100 lessons I could tell from that 18-month window. Just thinking back to that for you guys, is there any one piece of advice you would give to agents out there that they're not self-employed, but they want to build a career. They love agency. I saw on your bio, Jack, you share two things that are connected: a love for people, love for property. So if those types of mindsets are out there, what would be the kind of one big lesson that you would give people from that 18-month window for you guys? I'll start with Jack. I'll ask James the same question if that's cool.
Yeah, so I think what worked really well for us in the early days was omnipresence and just being everywhere. It was really surprising to see that when we put ourselves out there, how much support and love we got from friends, family, people we hadn't spoke to for such a long time. And that really helped us skyrocket the business. And I think people love seeing people starting out. They loved helping the little guys. And at the time when we launched, we were the little guys. We were the new agency in the area, and the love and support that we got because we put ourselves out there across social media, across as many platforms as we could. The omnipresence that brought was able to help us, as I said, push the business on a lot further, a lot quicker than we'd initially expected. So omnipresence for me, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah, I swear by that. Big game changer, the omnipresence. James, what about yourself?
I smiled through the whole point you made, Ian, because I can totally connect to it. So in the 17 years leading up to the point before leaving Purplebricks and starting the foundations of the Avenue, I felt like I've learned in the last 3 years, and like you said, the 12 or 18 months from launching the business as well, learned so much more in that short period of time than the 17 years that preceded it. And so it's hard to move away from Jack's point if you're talking about becoming an agent of choice, if you're talking about elevating your career so that let's be real, we've put in a serious graft. The avocado business, Mark, you building yours, Jack and I are building the Avenue. We've all put serious graft into the foundations at the beginning. But it starts to get to a point, I don't know whether you chaps agree, but it starts to get to a point where you feel like momentum is built to the degree that the snowball starts to carry its own momentum and starts to grow. And if you want to get to that point where it creates its own momentum, then you've got to put the graft in at the beginning. The foundation's got to be set right so that you're not constantly chasing new business. There are agents out there that are constantly chasing. They climb the hill by doing lots of prospecting, lots of outbound work. And then because they get busy, they let go of that prospecting and that outbound work. And then it starts to come crashing down again. And they have to, I've lost all my business and I've sold all my stock or they've come off the market or whatever else. So now I've got to start climbing that mountain again. The only way to avoid having to keep doing that forever is create a consistent rhythm. I think it's Daniel Priestley that says, isn't it? Try to find a way to create a perfectly repeatable week and just keep doing that over and over again. And we say it a lot, but you've got to become boringly consistent. Like it isn't that difficult if you can find a process and just stick to it day after day, week after week, until you get to a point where it's like, damn, people are coming to me organically. I'm getting reviews left, right, and centre. I'm getting people picking up the phone saying you sold my cousin's house or my uncle's house, and they said what an amazing job you did, and we're not inviting anybody else out. We only want to work with you.
Yeah.
My question was going to be, sorry, my question was going to be on the consistency side of things, actually, James, and how you build that. But do you think that having a boringly consistent week, excuse me, is one of the things that sets your business apart? And when people join and you talk about building the community and the omnipresence, but do you think that consistent week is a significant difference to their previous life as an agent that then breeds success?
I think the short answer to that, Mark, is absolutely. I think self-employed estate agency in the model that we've created, same as avocado, etc., it's very different to what agents will have experienced in any other model, whether it be online or traditional. It is, especially at the front end. And so that's where the boring consistency needs to begin, that front end, that tenacity to continue going despite the fact that there's no end in sight at that point for a few weeks. It might take, we recently launched an agent and it took her 8 days to get her first listing, but we've launched others and it's taken 8 weeks. So it's that ability to get going and keep going despite the fact that there's not instant gratification. And I think estate agents in general in the UK are used to that instant gratification of, I go to house, I list house, I go to next house, I list next house, and then the next sales house and process continues. And I think to thrive, I also believe that this mentality can be taken into the online and traditional arena. I don't think it's exclusive to the self-employed arena. I think if agents can start to develop that resilience, that discipline around boring, consistent behaviors, their businesses will elevate and skyrocket.
Yeah, yeah. I think with marketing, you mentioned about the snowball. I just want to go back on the snowball because it's something that I'm quite keen on talking about how to create the snowball because it kind of, in fact, we spoke about this once on this podcast. We were talking about it melting and we were talking about
Yeah, we were,
marketing.
yeah.
But effectively, as a business, you either buy a client or you're rewarded with a client. And to buy a client is fine. It means you're marketing. It means you've got your call center, you've got your brand, you've got everything going on. And you need to do that at the beginning because obviously it's very difficult to get recommended. But what you were talking about there with the snowball kind of really gets me thinking about this 1.5 strategy that I try and work on a lot with the avocado guys, which is for every client that you've got, and Jack, you were talking about the service levels and the experience. If you can get, after you've worked with that client, them to go out and proactively recommend 1.5 clients back to your service. So if you do 4 clients in a month, that you get 6 recommendations out of them, then after a couple of years, you never need to buy a client again. But on the flip to that, and where most agents go, is they're probably level. They might not get a detractor. They might not get someone that's negatively saying don't use X. The poor agents will. But the average agent, the middle 60% are just meh. They're not going out and proactively recommending. They're not being negative. It just was a sort of means to the end to get moved. If you can get to 1, you get 1 for 1, which is great. But if you can get to 1.5, if you can be 150% of each client, then eventually you'll never need to buy a client again because your recommendation level is so strong. And that's where the uncontested business comes in. That you have no need to go and speak to other agents because you've been trusted to be recommended by someone that has experienced your service and they've proactively gone out and said, no, use James, use Jack at the Avenue, use Mark. And that's really the sweet spot that I think you mentioned across the pond, and Sam talks to a lot of Australian real estate agents. That's the one thing that I often find with the US and the Australian that they get really well is they give that experience, that communication channel so strongly that they get super fans recommending them afterwards. And that's how you build that snowball effectively for me. See you nodding, James, kind of same sort of experience for you?
I would say 100%. We've created what we call the playbook in the Avenue, and one of the initial pieces that when we onboard a new agent, and one of the initial pieces, one of the foundational parts of the playbook that we then review with partners on an ongoing basis is a framework we called I Laser. So the I is for input. And I'm going to give you an analogy. The L is for leads, A is for appointments and instructions, S for sales, E for exchanges, and R is for reviews and referrals. Okay, so the R for me is the most important. And the way I visualize it and the way I explain it to our partners is imagine buckets that are tiered. So you've got one bucket below another. The I is a tap. The more you turn that tap on, the more input there is, the quicker you will fill that leads bucket. And then if you imagine they're on a pivot, the leads bucket will start to fill the appointments and instructions and so on and so forth. Now, the ultimate goal is to get that R bucket filled as quickly as possible, because the quicker you can fill the R, the quicker it becomes self-fulfilling and the quicker you start to create organic leads. So to your point, the reviews and the referrals start to create an organic business.
Yeah, exactly the same. Just a different analogy that's really easy to visualize, actually, Mark, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a financial services background, and they always talk about asking for reviews. Always talk about asking for referrals, and I don't think very many estate agents do it. And final question before we wrap up, I want to ask Jack, why do you think maybe estate agents are scared of asking for referrals, or it's not done very often in this industry?
I think you can only ask for referrals or recommendations if you believe you've done an amazing job of giving that client the best possible experience. We've got an agent in our business who all of her business comes through referrals, recommendations. You see that her local Facebook groups, and she's just recommended every time everyone questions about an estate agent. And I think if you can get those recommendations and referrals, they're the easiest clients to win over, because you're there are people referring you have already done 80% of the work for you. You've just got to go in there and make sure that they like you and they trust you, and you can finalize and get them over the line. So but I do believe we should be asking for more recommendations and referrals. Yeah, not enough people are doing it. Is it because they don't believe they've given that full service, or are they just not comfortable asking the question?
Maybe it comes down to confidence in your own service. And yeah, asking for a Google review, it's not like someone in agency just blankets that out to every completion. They cherry pick the Google reviews, typically speaking, across the industry for a reason. So yeah, confidence in your own service. But there's some great tips and value in there, guys. And it's been obviously I watch closely. You know, me and James know each other well from another podcast that we do, but I've watched the avenue unfold closely because there's a lot of similarities to what I do, and it's been a brilliant kind of watch. You guys have done really well, and yeah, 3 years down the line, it'd be very exciting to see what happens over the next 3 years as well. So if anyone wants to get in contact with the guys, we'll put some of the links in the show notes for this particular episode, and some really, really good value shared there. So yeah, thanks Jack, thanks James for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure.
Having fun.
Cheers, fellas. A massive thank you once again to James and Jack from the Avenue for joining us. And the biggest thing for me, the biggest takeaway there was speaking to somebody who, like, obviously experienced agents, but have transformed from one business style to another to suit their own desires, their needs, whatever word you might use there. But they completely transformed how they were doing business. And isn't that the great thing about running your own business and being involved in a estate agency? Because that was, you could see them both light up on the video when they were talking about the difference that they've got now versus the difference that they had in a previous life. That was the big, a big thing that I took away. And if anybody is thinking about it, then hopefully that tale should give them the inspiration to go and do it.
Yeah, yeah. As Jack was talking at the start when he answered your question about listing 40 houses a month and burnout, I think that's not spoken about enough. I think in agency, I think you can be cheap and high volume if you are selling a product or a service that's automated through technology. But when it involves people and humans, it's not the day and age for that anymore, I don't think. I don't think that should be the way things are done. And in agency, as we rightly all spoke about, it's a long process, it's a long journey.
Yeah.
So to try and do cheap and volume on a long process is practically impossible. So the fact that they experienced that burnout and that end of the market, and then were driven to create a blueprint and a playbook that was totally different, doesn't surprise me at all, because I totally relate to that myself. And I think more agents should be aware that if we can really get ourselves into a position where we focus on quality, be confident in our service, be confident in our fee, then the whole industry will improve as a result, because we're not firefighting at the bottom, sort of grasping for the low, cheap fruit, if you like. We're really going for the top of the tree. The more agency does that, like they do in Sam's country and in the US, not all of them obviously, but more of them are driven to do that, then the better for our industry. And I'll bang that drum until I retire, I would have thought.
Yeah, and we say at the end, it's one of the reasons we do this podcast. We want to see the standards improve, and it's interesting that the answer also that they gave to that and about seeing standards improve is that or I think it was Jack that said that he felt like he was letting his clients down. And you talk about the length of the process. I completely agree. If you want to create a business that's based on volume and think, that's absolutely fine, but you've got to do it in a way that you're not letting the client down. And I think that is something that as agents, we have to be really conscious about, because you're right. It's not a short process. It's a process where you're dealing with people's biggest tax-free asset. And then you throw in the emotion of the home and finding a new home, and that it's a very, I think it's a very important job that we have. I think we're very privileged to be able to do this job. But we've got to make sure that we're not letting people down. And I think part of that is driving standards for continual improvement, which they talked about, and being able to deliver, as Jack said in his answer, the best customer experience that we can. And that customer experience should be better tomorrow than it is today. And it should be constantly improving, which is something that they've talked about. I know that you and James, talk about generally in life.
Yeah, it's funny that they were both driven at a point with young children as well to buy back time effectively or work in a smarter way, which gave them more time and the ability to kind of be in and around and involved a little bit more with the family, which that's the trigger point for me for a lot of agents where we see the exit rate for estate agents kick in is often around that point in life. For me, there was no better job when I was 23, 24 years old going every quarter to a set of quarterly awards, picking up a trophy and getting taken to London or Marbella or wherever it may have been, at the end of the year, getting a pay rise at the end of the year, trying to hit commission, chalking up figures on the whiteboard. When I was 24, I'd work 11 hours, 12 hours a day for that. Like that was everything I was focused on. Second I had kids, settled down in a relationship, different world, like not interested. The priorities shift and people's goals throughout life change in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s. But a state agency doesn't allow the flexibility of those goals to change as you climb your life ladder, really. That the agency ladder does not relate to the life ladder, if that makes sense.
Well, I think I'll challenge that by what they talked about, because whilst maybe typical corporate estate agents, and I'm sure there's some that do, but maybe the typical corporate estate agents doesn't allow that. But actually, there are models out there that do.
Yes.
So maybe, and I think that's part of how estate agency is changing. Obviously, we've had the guys on with a self-employed model. We've got a self-employed model. You've got a self-employed model. There's a lot of people now going down that route for obvious reasons, and the work-life balance is one of those. But it's very hard to wake up one day and go into that without the experience of hitting the targets in your 20s and putting in the hours to make it work. So I think it does allow it, but probably not in very many corporate structures that are based more on volume. You mentioned Romans, and speaking to your marketing assistant about that, I think that's a really interesting conversation to have about a marketing machine. And in fact, Jack and James talked about the marketing machine of Purplebricks, and I thought that was a really interesting insight. In that, what did he say? I probably had to be about 10% of myself to get the listing at £1,000, and that makes a lot of sense. And you can see why that business performed as it did for a period of time, because the marketing machine was so very, very good. And I think whatever you think about Purplebricks, you cannot deny, having now heard them talk about it like that, but you can't deny it anyway over that period of time. That was a phenomenal marketing machine that really captured attention and captured attention, across the nation and on the stock exchange as well.
Yeah, and I think it still does. My stepdad the other day sent me a WhatsApp and said, Purplebricks are now free. How does that work? It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy thing to answer because you're not in the industry. So you can't say, oh, yeah, it's a joke or whatever. You have to actually give a logical answer. So yeah, totally agree with you on that. I think self-employed models have obviously evolved and erupted a lot since lockdown, but I think lockdown was a catalyst, but I think actually the time was right for the industry to have that other option, because there are a lot of people that are career-long estate agents that want to stay in it, but just don't want to work to those corporate style setup, and they want to have their own freedom of their diary and their finances and stuff like that. And that's what it allows to do. And models like yours and mine and Jack and James, it sort of allows that to happen, which is why it's becoming, the big talking point, across the industry, really. So, yeah.
It's right, isn't it? You should be able to set your week up how you want to set it up. James said that he was going home to play with the kids on a Tuesday morning. We live a short life. We should be able to do that. Doesn't mean that he's not working at another period in time or hasn't worked hard enough to get to this point, but actually it's just being aware of what you want and putting a week in place, because he talked about that as being boringly consistent. And I've heard that term from a few successful estate agents: rinse and repeat, be boringly consistent, do the same thing every week. And whilst our job is very reactive, it's very hard to do that. But it's clear, or it's becoming clearer to me, certainly, that actually that's the difference between getting here and then getting to the next level. Because they say you know, whatever got you here won't get you there. I think
Yeah.
that's probably, you know, a really valid point. Rinse and repeat each and every week. It's something I struggle with, because I tend to get excited by shiny new things, or like negotiating sales, and you know, all of the typical estate agency highs I'm guilty of. But actually, that boringly consistent was probably my biggest takeaway from that.
Yeah, and I think I've learned about consistency, discipline. Okay, it can be boring if it's repetitive, or it's the boring phrase comes from the fact it's just keep on doing
Yeah.
it. But the excitement comes in the results and the success, and parallel to the boring consistency of training or brushing your teeth or going to the gym, or working in the same model or the same setup, comes the results and the achievements, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where the excitement comes from. And if you're constantly diverting your route into a different direction, it can become really, really difficult to see those results and successes, and then you get caught in the wrong, hamster wheel effectively. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. But following that kind of goal, that path, and the training and the planning can feel boringly consistent, but the excitement comes, like I say, from the successes, and that's what we're definitely seeing with a lot of these new businesses that are unfolding, like the Avenue, which is great to see. We've got some
Yes.
good guests actually coming on. So if you're not subscribed, to Spotify or Apple or whatever channel you're listening to, we've got some really good guests coming up over the next couple of weeks, couple of months. So definitely check in. We're going to be recording, hopefully, as long as all things go ahead, with Megan 18 next week, which I'm looking forward to as well. I know Sam's had some great guests on in Australia too.
Yeah.
And if you've listened all the way to the end, the exciting news is that we're now video led as well. So you'll find us on YouTube channel, you'll find the Instagram, you'll find the Facebook page, and you'll find TikTok. So whatever your method of watching videos is, just search World Class Real Estate, look for the blue logo on any of those platforms. Make sure you give us a follow, and we'll have some highlight clips from each episode going onto those channels as well, which is exciting, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If you're not following those channels, please hit subscribe or follow on those. As you know, we do this because we love our industry. We want to see it improve and get better. So if you have enjoyed today's episode and you haven't subscribed already, please click that link, share this out with colleagues, or reach out on social media. I'm Mark Worrell. He's Ian Macbeth. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.